Welcome to Down to Earth Astrology and Primal Girl Wellness. This is Miss Jenny, and I am your astrologer. Today's day is May 27th, 2022. Just a couple days ago, we had, again, a horrific mass shooting involving a semi-automatic rifle or assault rifle that does not belong in the hands of civilians. And yesterday, our political leadership, after saying that they would force a vote on gun control as a result of this, and the outrage felt across the nation, went on break instead, because apparently their political alliances with each other and their friendships with each other in order to get stuff done in the future is more important to them than having any moral fiber or backbone when it comes to other people's children. So there you go. There you go. So rather than having these senators who would not allow gun control on the record, showing everybody exactly who they are, no, we're just going to all hold hands and skip off into the sunset and pretend that like we've got other things we need to do to process this. You don't need me to remind you that this is class warfare. They're not as invested in this as we are because their children will never be in positions where they're getting shot or risking getting shot, at least not on the frequency of possibility that ours are. I'm just saying. Okay, so the month of June is starting off as a continuation of May. Just what you wanted to hear, I know. So, some important things that are happening this first week of June. First, Mercury will station direct. However, Mercury will station direct conjunct the fixed star Algol, and then it has to cross the 29th degree of Taurus on the 12th. But for now, focus on Algol and Mercury stationing direct on Algol on June 3rd, which is how we're opening up the month. At the same time, within 24 hours, Saturn will have officially stationed direct, or I'm sorry, I'm a mess right now. Saturn will also simultaneously be stationing retrograde in Aquarius. This troublesome Saturn in Aquarius we've been dealing with for what seems like forever now. And not a couple days after that, we're heading into a quarter moon at 16 Virgo. And, on the very first of the month, we've got Mars contra Anticia Neptune. Sorry. So, let's kind of break this down. First thing, as we start the month, Mars contra Anticia Neptune on June 1st, which is accompanied with this Mercury station direct. Remember, we feel these stations before they're officially exact. Mars contra Anticia Neptune, coupled with Mercury stationing direct conjunct Algol and Saturn stationing retrograde, presents a whole basket of vipers we're going to have to deal with. So the first thing you need to know is that there's going to be more than deception. There's going to be a lot of confusion and a whole lot of chickens running around with their heads cut off this first week of the month. Considering what we're dealing with here in the U.S., this makes complete sense. If you're anywhere else in the globe, you'll still see the same phenomena where people literally don't know, like chickens with their heads cut off, running around like crazy people. But I can't, because I don't live there and I don't know what's going on out there, I don't know what would be the cause for this phenomenon where you're at. Just know that it's happening. Here in the United States, this is what it is. And some of those chickens and roosters do need their heads cut off. Dear God. Oh my God. Nothing but noise. Nothing but noise and chicken poop everywhere. They're not good for anything. Anyway, now here's some things. Let's start with the Saturn station retrograde. Now the Saturn station retrograde is on the 4th. Give or take a few hours in either direction, depending on where you are in your time zone. And the quarter moon is approaching right behind it at 16 Virgo. Now, this combination of things right here, it definitely is going to give us some pause for thought. Because when Saturn goes retrograde, it's typically crankier than it usually is. I know, as if that were possible. Saturn retrograde. Is this thing on? It sounds like a commercial. Is this thing on? Yeah, it is. Sorry. It's been a long month. Saturn in and of itself is typically cranky. Saturn station retrograde is really damn cranky because, just wow, right? And within an Aquarius, one of the things that happens is that we go from progressive foresight, moving forward kind of thinking and energy into a much more Capricornian type of mentality, which is much more regressive and fearful, and very locked in place and rigid. Right now, Aquarius is pretty rigid too. Don't make any mistakes about that. But Aquarius is concerned with the future, and Aquarius is willing to take risks. Capricorn is not. Capricorn is not a risk taker. At best, it's a calculated risk, which for them literally is just a calculated prediction. It's not even a risk. With Saturn going retrograde in Aquarius, one of the things that we can expect to find during this time, and especially right now this week, are a bunch of people who were not acting like this before, even in your personal lives, who suddenly are now much more cranky and mean and selfish. But more importantly, much more demanding of show me something. Show me something. Remember, it's all about risks or calculated risks, which are predictions. So, where Saturn in Aquarius might take you on your word and kind of let you roll with something, Saturn retrograde in Aquarius is going to say, nope, nope, nope. What is it? Show me the money. It's going to make you stand for something and show them proof of something, anything, because they don't want to take any more risks. And this is going to continue the entire time Saturn is in Aquarius retrograde. Now, some caveats about this. While Saturn is retrograde in Aquarius, it won't always feel like this. This is just right now around this station that particular way of thinking and doing things is going to be really amplified. And remember, this is also combined with that quarter moon at 16 Virgo. Now, the quarter moon at 16 Virgo is disposited by that Mercury, which is making its station. And that means that, boy, the crankiness levels are going to be through the damn roof, right? So the difference is, rather than having unstable people doing unpredictable things that are huge bad things for the rest of us, we've been dealing with this. In this particular case, the cowards are going to be more cowardly. You got to know that. And also, what this means is that the people who are taking names and kicking ass, people who are literally keeping notes, keeping the score, are really going to tally up these scores and force people to come to the table with something tangible, right? So, and remember, Mars is conjunct anti-Sea at the very beginning of the month. So you can expect a whole lot of people trying to duck, dodge, and dive to get out of responsibility, while at the same time, the quarter moon in Virgo, Saturn station retrograde, and Mercury station in direct on Algol are going to force people to be accountable, not only to other people, but to themselves for their own lives, right? You must hold yourself accountable. That's accountability is the foundation of integrity, right? Remember that. All right, so let's talk about this Mercury station direct conjunct Algol, right? Because there's like, oh my God, Algol, whoa, people losing their minds, beheading. And all of these things may very well be fine and true and shown through history. But the other thing I want to give you, because remember, with all of the things that I give you, and especially astrology, if you're practicing, I want you to remember that you're going to go wherever you're focusing on. So it's just like riding a motorcycle. They tell you, focus on where you're trying to go, not where you're trying to avoid. Because if you're looking at a ditch while you're riding that motorcycle, but you're trying to avoid it, if you're looking at the ditch, that's where the motorcycle is going to go. So it's the same thing with astrology and life. Focus on where you're trying to go. Be aware of the problems around you, but focus on where you're trying to go, not where you're trying to avoid. So with that said, Mercury with Algol. Algol is the fixed star of feminine power. This is the time when women have the most power and influence. Okay, so whether you are a woman or you're a supporter of women, which you should be if you had a mother, okay, or you've got daughters, this is a very, very profound and powerful time for those voices to be raised and heard and action to be forced, right? The time of reckoning is now. We've been talking about this all year long. We are in a time of reckoning, and it's getting closer and closer and closer to the end point. All right, we're in so many ways, all of us are trying to right the scales. Well, in what we think is the universe is trying to right the scales. Let me put it that way. Some of us have very, very weird ideas about what writing the scales are. Clarence Thomas. Anyway, so as we get to the 9th, where this Mercury station is dragged, watch for powerful and profound shifts in fortunes for people who are in very lucky protected positions, as well as people who are in the most dire circumstances. Across the board, from the entire spectrum, one and the other, watch for major changes in fortune, and also watch for the people who have been betrayed. Remember, Algol is the fixed star that describes the myth of Medusa, right? For people who have been betrayed, to really bring it home and knock it out of the park in terms of changing the trajectory of the future. So this is going to seem like a hairy, scary week because, you know, Jesus, it never gets any better around here, I swear, right? But hidden inside there, just like a walnut, right? Inside the walnut, if you can crack it, that's where the meat is. That's where the really valuable stuff is. So Algol, with that Mercury station direct, is emphasizing the ability to give you extra power and influence and really almost supernatural ability to change the trajectory and course of the future. If you're a woman, if you're a supporter of women, if you're coming from and working through feminine power and feminine issues and feminine things, because Algol is the fixed star for women's power, female empowerment. All right, now this is all going on the first week of the month, and as we get down closer to the 12th or 13th, mark your calendars for this, the 12th or 13th, Mercury is going to come away from Algol and it will cross the 29th degree of Taurus, which is not a happy position for it to be because it is the constellation of the Weeping Sisters. So whatever it is that we're dealing with, we may be revisiting. I know you don't want to hear this. I didn't say June was going to be a better month. We may be revisiting these things by the time we get to the 12th, 13th, which begins the second week of June. Now, the second week of June, we've got a number of things happening because there's a full moon that week. So on the 12th or 13th, Mercury will hit the 29th degree of Taurus, which is the constellation of the Weeping Sisters. We just went through this with this mass shooting. The Pleiades, or the Weeping Sisters, were activated with a bunch of other stuff in conjunction with it, and what we ended up with was this disaster in Texas and this disastrous response by the police or the law enforcement, and a whole lot of questions that need to be answered that people are scrambling to avoid answering because nobody wants to be held accountable for something like this. But at the end of the day, accountability is the root, the foundation of integrity. And if you're law enforcement and your political leadership has no integrity, then you're just screwed, right? If anybody needs to have that, they need to have that. That's part of the job. So there's that. Now, at the same time, right after Mercury passes that 29th degree, it's going to enter Gemini. It still remains in the Pleiades constellation of the degrees of the Weeping Sister. We're going to be going through this pretty much all week long. Mercury will also contra antecede Pluto just shortly after that, around the 16th. You might want to mark that day as well, June 16th. And this is definitely going to force or not fracture. This is definitely going to force and fracture issues where power is concerned, right? Or people in positions of power, or powerful force and fracture of situations that need to be, like that walnut, need to be cracked open so we can get to the valuable parts of it. Now, the full moon occurs on the 14th. Now we're going to feel, thank God, it's not an eclipse, but it is a full moon. So we're going to be feeling it a couple of days before and a couple of days after, because that full moons always are kind of like this, right? Like that wave kind of swells up and that swells down. So we've got a couple of days around the full moon where there's stuff that we're dealing with. So the full moon will be at 23 Sagittarius. Now this particular full moon, on top of all the stuff with Mercury going on, Mercury, this full moon will square Neptune and the fixed star Lesath. Lesath is Lesath. I say Lesath. It is a particularly malevolent, ugly, nasty fixed star. This, in combination with that Mercury contra antecede Pluto and Mercury at the 29th degree, moving into 0 degree Gemini and the Pleiades, remaining in the Pleiades constellation, degrees of Weeping Sisters. This doesn't promise anything good. It does not promise anything good. In fact, it promises even more problems. But specific problems. With Lesath, what you get are people who are criminal liars, people who, like these scam artists, right? Like their whole MO and purpose in life is to see what they can do to get away with that involves lying and malicious intent and criminal intent. And I don't care who I screw over. I want mine. And listen, you're just collateral damage, honey. This is what we can expect around this full moon. So expect and be prepared for the second week of June from the 10th to the 19th, especially around the full moon itself, to be particularly nasty, and for the devil's agents, if you believe in that sort of stuff, for the demons literally to be out in force and at play. So don't believe anything that you're hearing. Remember, believe what people do, not what they promise. All right? And that's just the rule for life, but especially true and powerful right now. So we're seeing a lot of activism and a lot of hair-raising screaming and demands and calls to action and things being done, things actually getting done with a lot more power than normal this first week of the month. And this is going to be primarily driven by women and women's concerns. Mothers are women and children are women's concerns, because we can't produce 100,000 kids in a lifetime. We're limited to how many physical children we can have in our reproductive windows. And even then, each childbirth is literally a life-threatening proposition for us that puts us out of commission for at least 2 or 3 years. A year while we're being pregnant and 2 years afterwards while we're taking care of an infant. So for women, children is a woman's issue because it is directly tied to us, and our ability to function and do things. So the first week of June is a powerful time for women to raise their voices, move their feet, and make shit happen. Believe it. Take advantage of that wave behind you, or that wind in your sail, and use it. When we get down to the second week of the month, we're still lots of tears and gnashing of teeth, because we've got Mercury remaining solidly in the constellation of the Weeping Sisters, and a full moon this week, and Saturn just went retrograde last week, blah, blah, blah. So, and the full moon is conjunct Lesath, a particularly nasty fixed star. So the second week of June, we can absolutely expect a lot of kickback and a lot of pushback from people who don't want to be held accountable, who don't want things to change, who don't want to fix things, or most importantly, know they've done wrong. And rather than take and hold themselves accountable and responsible and make right these situations, they're going to lie, cheat, steal, rob, like every nasty thing you can think of that puts you at a disadvantage and leaves you hurting or destroyed, rather than them being inconvenienced, or put out, with their behinds hanging out and having to explain themselves. So watch that second week, and watch especially people who are dancing, really, really dancing and trying to get out of stuff and pointing fingers in all directions. They're already starting. It's going to get worse. This literally is going to amplify in the second week. Now, while this is happening, Venus will conjunct Uranus, which, again, female power, female empowerment, women raising the roof, truth, getting to the truth of the matter. And also, Venus rules money, Uranus rules truth. So there should be, I would expect, a lot of exposure, talk about coming to Jesus, a lot of exposure about finances or money or something with banking. We'll see how that plays out. Venus will square Saturn on the 19th, and that's just going to make us all not happy, just not happy. Very practical, pragmatic, kind of, dragged back to, the here and now stuff we have to deal with. So be prepared for some depressive episodes around the 19th. But all in all, the second week of June is going to be the hot week. The first week is tense and complicated, but there's power in there. If you start your initiatives now, you can get a whole lot more done than you ever thought was possible, because the winds are in your sail at your back. The second week, you're going to see a lot of pushback as people panic, because, oh my God, you really are managing to move the boulder. Oh, you're not supposed to be able to do that. So we can expect a lot of flaring up from some people as they go into coward mode and panic, because the protection they thought they had is all being moved by people they didn't think were going to be able to do it. So watch for that around that full moon. When we get to the third week of the month, which will be June 20th to 26th, the June 20th particularly is a really big hot spot and a really big hot spot and sensitive spot. So mark your calendars for these days, the 19th and the 20th. Now, on the 20th, we have a quarter moon at 29 Pisces, last degree of the last sign of the zodiac. Remember that. And it will be conjuncting Neptune. It's a couple degrees out, but it's still conjunct. And at the same time, Venus now Venus will be conjuncting Algol. Venus is the planet that rules women and young girls. Algol, again, female empowerment, women's power, feminine power, among all the other awful things that they ascribe to this. So with this quarter moon at 29 Pisces, conjuncting Neptune, and Venus conjunct Algol, there is the very distinct possibility that at this time, the meek shall inherit the earth, the last will be first. So people who have been historically at a disadvantage, people who have historically had no power or no voice, people who have historically been victimized, right? Or the sacrificial lambs, or whatever it is you want to call it, where you're basically the person gets thrown into the volcano and you don't have a whole lot of choice about it. These are the people who will have the most power and visible presence and influence at this time. So it's not the rise of the robots, it's the rise of the underdog. And not people who are playing victims and want to see themselves as martyrs. These are literally people who are in really disadvantaged positions. And I hate to say it, boys and girls, but this is again coming back to women. This is about women rising up. This is about women being empowered. Females during this month who actively, and men who actively support women and their causes. This is the time when you will have the most power and influence to get stuff done. You've got a lot of divine support behind you, but you have to do the work. You've got to get out there and do the damn work. So big brother and big sister standing behind you, but you're the one who's got to fight the fight. Okay. During this week also, the sun has moved into Cancer on the 22nd, and Venus has moved into Gemini on the 23rd. Now, this is good because it allows us a little more flexibility and a lot more direction, and because prior to this, the sun was in Taurus, which is a very slow-moving, plodding, kind of keep the status quo position for the sun. When the sun moves into Cancer, now we're moving into all what is it, full speed ahead, all torpedoes down, let's go. So we'll have much more directional effort, especially coming from leadership, which we should have had before now, but listen, you got to work with what you got in front of you, right? And listen, remember their names, and fire them this November. Make sure you're taking a list of their names and you're looking at their histories. And don't forget, your local leadership is just as important. Your local elections typically are the ones that nobody pays any attention to. And that's how people like Lauren Boebert, and Paul Gosar and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, this is how these people get into office and work their way up to Senate. They have to start somewhere, and everybody starts at local leadership. So watch your local leadership and who you're voting in and out of their jobs as well. That's extremely important, right? Don't focus on the figurehead. Focus on all of them that are making policies, which is laws, for you, that they're not necessarily going to see themselves having to be responsible for adhering to, right? Laws don't apply to me. I'm a politician. All right. Sorry. Okay. Now, Venus, when it moves into Gemini on the 23rd, here's something I want to share with you. This was interesting. And this is going to be our goddess or god story or mythology for this episode. When Venus moves into Gemini on the 23rd, it will conjunct the fixed star Atlas in the Pleiades constellation. The Pleiades constellation being the degree of the Weeping Sisters. Now, the Atlas is not a Weeping Sister. Atlas is actually the father of the Weeping Sisters, and he is known as the Endurer, or the Titan bearing up the heavens. And if you're familiar with the mythology or the image of Atlas, you know that Atlas was condemned to support the weight of the heavens on his head and his hands. He's the big guy carrying what looks like the world on his shoulders, right? Now, what you might not know, and I didn't know this either until now, what his actual mythology and story describes, and the reason he was condemned to do this, is because he attempted trickery, shirking of responsibilities, and or siding with the wrong people. In fact, the burden that Atlas is given as his punishment for eternity is because Atlas was being punished for siding with the Titans. The Titans were the old generation of gods who were in a 10-year battle with a younger generation known as the Olympians. The old guard lost, as old guards will, because we have to move forward with evolution. Evolution requires that we move forward and make progress. So the younger generation of Olympians won the battle and became the new, was it panoply of gods. And Atlas, in response to his siding with the wrong side and specifically his attempts at trickery and shirking of responsibilities, because Atlas was not a great guy. No integrity. Atlas was forced to carry the weight of the world on his head and his shoulders. Now, if you look it up, it's actually pretty interesting. So look up the Battle of the Titans, or there's a funny word for it called Titanomachy. But certainly look up the Battle of the Titans and Olympians, and you'll find some really interesting history there with that. So all of this is to say, my friends, is that when Venus conjuncts Atlas in the Pleiades constellation, and Venus activates the energy of that fixed star Atlas, this is very much, one, going to feel like we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders if we're trying to get anything done. But also simultaneously, what it does mean is that anyone who is siding with the wrong side, anyone who is siding with the side of maintaining status quo or regression, as opposed to getting the hell out of the way and letting progress and evolution occur, the people who are resisting that are the ones who are going to suffer for eternity and have to carry the weight of their mistakes on their shoulders, visibly for everyone to see. So with that said, I would not want to be one of these senators who's fighting gun control. Guys, this is a much bigger deal than just, oh, well, I made a mistake and people forget. No. Come this week, this third week of the month, and certainly down around the 22nd, this is when your sins, I guess you could call it, you're going to bear the weight of your mistakes, and your sins and your errors and your lack of integrity, Atlas, on your head and your shoulders for the world to see for eternity. It will never not be visible when people look at you. It'll be the first thing they see and the one thing they think of about you. That's what we're looking at when we get down to the sun changing signs and things really starting to pop and crackle and happen around the 22nd. So ladies and supporters of mothers and daughters, man, get out there, because these first 2 weeks of the month, you've got all kinds of universal and divine providence behind you supporting your efforts. You're stronger than you know, and right now you've got more powerful allies than you realize. All right, now getting down to the last week of the month. So this is, I've got this broken up kind of in an odd way, but it's June 27th to July 1st. Now, July 1st, we will have a new moon at 7 Cancer, or in this week rather, we will have a new moon at 7 Cancer squaring Jupiter, which is going to help lighten things. Boy, do we need it. Now, Mars will be squaring Pluto at the same time, and it will be in the constellation Andromeda, and Neptune will be stationed retrograde at 25 Pisces. So it's not a great week, but it's not nearly as hair-raising as the first 3 weeks. And none of these 3 weeks are nearly as bad as the last 2 weeks of May. So we're moving forward into easier times, but man, we got quite the field of landmines we got to dance around to get to the other side of this. So with this particular week, 27th to the 1st, that new moon squaring Jupiter, Mars squaring Pluto, Neptune station retrograde in Pisces, it's still going to be a hotbed of negotiation and trying to apply force or too much force or the measure of force, a lot of control. Mars squaring Pluto also suggests the possibility of military action as a last resort. Doesn't have to be like that. Does not have to be like that. Mars square Pluto also, remember this, Mars square Pluto also represents reform, right? And literally getting stuff done, making the deep, powerful, important changes. So it doesn't necessarily have to be military action, but it does represent like a unified, organized, structured force to make something happen. Whether that's legislatively or out on the streets, I don't know. We'll find out. But that's what it's about. So if you want this to be major legislative changes that go into effect, right, and are huge, huge, and just involve everybody, whether they want to go along for the ride or not. Get it done before now, because when we get to this last week of the month, that the orders are going to be sent, and that's it. Things are going to get mobilized one way or the other. No, I'm not sure, but I think Roe v. Wade here in the United States is getting voted on this month. I'm not sure. I should know this, right? It's so much stuff. But that may be part of what we're dealing with this, on top of the shooting and gun control. All of these things are powerfully important issues, especially when it comes to womanhood, and children, because children are very much tied to womanhood, in terms of high priority values. We only get so many kids in a lifetime. We're not letting you kill them. We're not like you. We can't go shooting babies, everywhere indiscriminately we want, like until we're 90. It's not like that. So children have a much more high value to women, biologically speaking, than they do to men, because we are really limited. And the few that we do have are also life-threatening propositions. So making babies for us is totally different conversation than making babies for a man. Just saying, it's biology, it's nature. All you gotta do is look around. Okay, so during this week, what will be activated is the constellation Andromeda. Now, the constellation Andromeda has the winged horse Pegasus in it. And the winged horse Pegasus is important in mythology because there's a thing called the Pegasus syndrome, which has a lot to do with people overreaching. Really, talk about ambition. It's ambition out of control, or the ability to fly over, to rise above, the petty and your trouble. So literally, in all cases, Pegasus has a lot to do with rising up and above the mundane or the ordinary. But there's two parts of this story. On the one hand, Bellerophon, hang on, what is his name? Bellerophon was with Pegasus syndrome and the horse Pegasus. Bellerophon was unbelievably ambitious and had far more overreach than any sane thinking person should have had. So he pushed Pegasus to go further than Pegasus was able to go with him on his back, and also to heights that Bellerophon was not worthy of going to, right? So Bellerophon wanted to reach Olympus and the gods and use Pegasus to get there. He was not worthy nor invited. So his ambitious overreach caused Pegasus to throw him from his back and cast him back down to earth, where he died. So that was his demise. His ambition was his death, or the cause of his death. His overreach was the cause of his demise. So there's that side of the story. The other side of the story is Pegasus, and Pegasus is very much about flying up and away over your troubles. So Pegasus managed to get free, and once Pegasus, the horse, the winged horse, got high enough, Pegasus was able to liberate himself from all of the things that held him captive, below him. But it required getting above that, rising to a higher level to find your freedom, to get out of those situations. So more than turning the right cheek, it's literally about taking the higher road, in lots of ways. So that is how we're ending the month. The other thing is that with Pegasus and the Andromeda constellation and the end of this month with Neptune stationing retrograde, Mars squaring Pluto, new moon square Jupiter, so there's going to be a lot of ambition and overreach, we know. But it also, remember, more than anything, this also has to do with having a mission in life, right? So check in with yourself and check in with your mission and ask yourself, do you have a mission? And if you do have a mission, is it a mission that is truly worthy, or is this ambitious overreach? Is this something that you're doing to glorify your ego at the expense of someone else, Pegasus, right? Or is this something that needs to be done because you really are championing something that needs to be handled, so we can all kind of get on with things. We can all get out of bondage, as it were. And so that's it. All right. So my friends, this has been your June horoscope. longer than I thought it was. I'm going to put the link, or I'm going to put the clip in now after this for the June horoscope that we predicted in January, with a link to that whole video in the description box. You can look at it if you want. It's going to be sideways. I'm sorry, my video editing's not its best this week. Actually, nothing is really at its best this week. So that's it. Keep the faith. Keep your head up. Remember, just like riding a motorcycle, don't look at the things you're trying to avoid. Be aware of them, but focus on where you're trying to go, because that's where your motorcycle is going to end up. That's where your vehicle is going to take you. So no matter how bad things look right now, keep your eye on the prize and where you want to be at the end of this. Be aware of what's happening around you and all the troubles, but understand that you've got to know where you're trying to go if you want to get there. Because it matters, because you matter, because it matters, you know, and this is a time of reckoning. This entire year has been a time of reckoning. The goddess has risen. I know some of you don't want to hear that, sure, whatever. The goddess has risen. I tell you what, she is coming for some of you, some bitches. She is coming for you. She's been rising. She has risen. This is the time when we right the scales. The time of reckoning is here. So y'all keep fighting and try to hold women down and attack women and attack children like the only thing that matters is you and your giant phallic symbols, because dinosaurs couldn't stop evolution and neither can you. So, all right. Keep the faith, folks. I'll see you guys in July. Bye. Oof. All right. Also this month, and remember, Mercury is going retrograde at 29 Taurus, and that will happen just a couple of days after the eclipse, and Jupiter going to Aries. It's just the middle to last couple of weeks of this month in May are just, get your Xanax, honey. Get your Xanax. Okay. Now, the positive side, there is a positive side here. The positive side here is that this is a very energetic, focused month. So there is the possibility that if we can avoid the worst, we can certainly move towards the best and get a whole lot done. This can be a wildly productive month in terms of breaking new ground and actually pushing past obstacles, right? And really starting to break ground to build big, powerful things, right? They don't always have to be awful things, but we got to do the work beforehand and be prepared for that and set that situation up. All right. Now, and this takes us now to June. So when we get down to June, Mars, lovely, lovely Mars, will be in Aries all month long, which is exactly where I don't want to see this planet. But, you know, it's going to do it eventually every year. So I guess we have to live with it, right? So Mars in Aries is the sign and placement of the warrior. Mars in Aries loves competition, conflict, challenge, conquest. Mars loves the battle. So whether it's a battle of wits or it's a battle of arms, Mars is all there for it. Now, with Mars in Aries all month long, after the May we just had, this means one of two things. Either we will go into globally, we will start going into a full-blown conflict because Mars and Aries will continue what was started in May, or we're going to have just an incredibly energetic month where we can get a whole lot done. Now, in the month of June, Mercury will go into Gemini, which is good because it gives us a lot more flexibility in our thinking and the ability to see multiple viewpoints, not just our own, which you desperately need whenever anything is emphasized in Aries, because they're really good about putting their own stuff forward, not really good about listening to other people's viewpoints, although they would tell you otherwise. And Venus goes into Taurus at the end of the month, which means that Venus will be in Aries all month long too. So June is going to be great for love, romance, sex. Not so good for other stuff. Whatever we get in June is going to be a continuation of May. So pay attention and let's prepare and plan and direct that energy now. On a personal note, it will be a fantastic month for romantic fun and games. So as always, I would say, folks, be careful, be smart, use protection, wear a mask and the condom. Do not make yourself a human disaster movie. And if you're in a committed relationship, obviously, talk to your partner first. Get permission. I'm just saying. Jeez. For those of you who are single and looking for relationships, or in poly relationships looking for additional poly partners, this will be a very sexy month. But I don't know that anything born of this month or that comes through this month is going to have the stamina necessary to last. But boy, will it be amazing and exciting while it lasts. So don't let that throw you. And if you're one of those people that really likes excitement and fire and drama in your relationships, things started this month will definitely have all the interest peaking that you enjoy that will keep your attention long past the time other people would have been exhausted. So there's that. All right, and now we're down to the third quarter. This is July through September of 2022. In this quarter, we will have Jupiter